everybody. I don't know what I'm making this video for. I don't know where it's going to be posted. So wherever you're seeing this video, hi. I wanted to talk about the comparisons between Tender is the Flesh and 1984. I think the only reason that people are comparing those two books is because they're both dystopian. Other than that, I don't really see a lot of similarities. I mean, I guess government control, but that kind of falls under dystopian literature. There's reasons that I like and dislike both of them, and I think one of them is better at doing things wrong, and I'll get into that in a minute. So I really did like Tender is the Flesh. I feel conflicted about it because while it is really interesting and bringing up, things that should be thought about and things that should be talked about, I think that it's done a little bit wrong because there is no substance to the characters. It's like people come in and out and we don't know anything about them, and they interact and we still don't know anything about them, and then bad things happen and then the book is over. It made me think a lot, and it made me think critically about the topics that it's trying to get conversation started, but not every person that reads that book is going to be able to think critically about it while they're reading it, and some of them are going to take it at face value, which it's just gore, it's just sexual abuse. And I ordered another one of the author's books, and I have higher hopes for it because the author, they're incredibly good at writing and their use of descriptive words is impressive. It's just not what I wanted from this book. And when people compare books to 1984, I hold them in a certain light because 1984 it's really well written, and it's held on such a pedestal that when someone talks about certain aspects, you think that a book is going to be of a certain quality. Now, I also want to say I've been reading 1984, and there are things that I don't like about it, and it does that in a better way than Tender is the Flesh, because that book doesn't really make me question why the character's doing what they do. It just makes me angry and confused, and maybe that's the point. That's okay. Maybe that book is not for me. Again, that's okay. But 1984 makes me question why the character is doing things a certain way, and it makes me think, well, maybe every perspective is flawed a little bit. And I think that that's kind of the point, is that like every perspective is unique to the individual. And I mean, I think it's solipsism is the philosophical belief of only your own mind exists, and I think that that's a lazy form of philosophy, but at the same time it makes sense, especially for this book where you know the government is controlling things. In that instance, all you know is your own perspective, because it's not safe to talk to other people about their other perspectives, or at least that's what I haven't gotten far enough to know the entirety, so I don't want to speak on it as if this is like what it is in its entirety. But the government makes it so that you can't comfortably talk with people and you can't know other people's perspectives, and because of that it makes it harder for them to rise up against this, because you're not sure if anybody else knows what's going on, you're not sure if anybody else agrees with the thoughts that you hold, and that's the point. Like the character says and does questionable things, like he thinks about killing the woman that he is interested in because she might know that he's somewhere he's not supposed to be. But then later on, when he realizes that she's not working against him, he's like, oh, well, maybe I am in love with her. And it's confusing and conflicting, but in a way that I can understand. Like he has questionable thoughts and he has questionable behaviors, but at least I understand that it's because they erase people from existence. They never existed when the government is done. And so I can understand why he does things the way that he does. But in Tender is the Flesh, they explain some of the rules that the government put in place, and they explain some of the reason. Like, I guess the main character was part of the reason that these rules were set in place, because he was around kind of in the time that they were developing this sort of basis of the government of eating humans, because all meat is contaminated. And again, it's a sort of thing with the government where they're like, well, we don't actually believe that all the meat is contaminated because he runs into some puppies and he's like, there's no way these, like, I'm not gonna get sick, I didn't die. And so there's a questioning of the government, but it just doesn't go hand in hand, because like in 1984 there's this mistrust, there's the government control, but there's realistically 2 consenting adults. In Tender is the Flesh, there's mistrust, there's questioning of the government, there's a lot of those similar things, but ultimately the humans that are bred as meat cannot consent. They cannot communicate, and it's confusing because they try, the way it's written, they're trying to show that she loves the person that's taking care of her, but that's not proving anything other than you made her feel safe, you fed her, you took care of her, and so she loves you and has loyalty to you. That still doesn't prove that she consented. Ultimately, I think that book was just not for me, and the more that I think about it, the more I realize that it really just made me grossed out. It's okay for literature to make you uncomfortable, sometimes that's the point, because certain things you're supposed to be uncomfortable with, and it's valid in that in its own right. I'm just worried that people won't recognize that. Like, if that's the intentions of it, is to make people uncomfortable and make them question things, that's perfectly fine, but it's not, that's not the selling point. People aren't selling it as it's supposed to make you uncomfortable and make you question things. 1984 has been banned and will be continued to be banned, which is hilarious because the government is trying to control a book about government control. But 1984 is like, you know what you're expecting. You know that it's, I don't want to say satirical, but it's commentary on what is wrong with our government. Tender is the Flesh, the only thing that really was the selling point was that it was like 1984, but really the similarities aren't there, and I just think they need different selling points. I think if they sold it to me telling me that it is an uncomfortable commentary on the potential of scarcity and of no longer having specific sources of meat and government control and mistrust with other people and the government, because obviously the not believing the virus is the government using their power incorrectly and whatever. If they sold it as that, I would have had better expectations of what I was getting into, but I really just feel that it was portrayed poorly. I think if you have the right perspectives going into it and reading it, I think you absolutely could enjoy this book and could think critically about it, and it could be a more meaningful read. But for me personally, I didn't have that going into it, and I think that I wouldn't like to read it again because of it just gave me a really, off the first read, it just gave me a poor interaction. And yeah, I would still say, honestly, I would still say that people should read it. I think that you should read it critically and understand the concepts underneath it and do a little bit of research before you decide to read it, because it could be triggering. I could see how it could be triggering, but I think that some of the comparisons were just wrong. I think there are positives and negatives to both books, but I don't find them to be comparable. Anyways, thank you for listening to my ramblings. I hope this encouraged you to be more intentional with your reading and think more critically on the readings that you do. If there is a specific opinion you hold about this book, you are absolutely entitled to share it. You do not have to agree with me about my opinions on either of these books. I would like to hear your own thoughts, and there's a lot of books that have been compared to 1984. There are more of them that I would like to read. I don't remember them off the top of my head. Maybe in the future I can do a comparison of some books that have been compared to 1984. But I think that that's everything that I have for you right now. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you have a lovely day.